can't help ourselves. It is in your nature to give. But ours? To take. Our need to be first, to be the best.
Hello, Yvette.
We're all a threat. Even me. Oh.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
In our film, the lead character, there's 3 astronauts, and the lead character, she is on this mission, this very capitalist mission, to extract water from Europa, a real place, which is one of the only places in our solar system that we believe there's proof of life.
So Europa is the 3rd virtual production show that ETC is doing and the 7th innovation film that we're doing. The idea was to basically test these new technologies on short films. That would be led by a fresh graduate out of the MFA program at USC.
The whole culture at Sony is so collaborative and storytellers first, and I never had to second guess that. You don't always get that lucky as a filmmaker to really be in these safe, capable hands, but since day one at this company with Sony and with Pixo, and being able to be the first narrative film once they have merged has just been such a beautiful, pioneering moment in this new frontier of virtual production.
I think we've been following the innovation track. We're going through a time in history which there is quite a bit of innovation. As you look at virtual production, metadata, all these other technologies, it's an exciting time to be a filmmaker.
Something very interesting about working with the Sony group, because they've kind of brought a number of other experts within the umbrella, right? So there's Pixamonda to help us with what's happening at the stage, discussions around VAD, and then there's Torchlight now as well that came into the discussion.
Biggest challenge in this regard is that the vision of the director, she had a large scope, and trying to figure out how to bring that director's vision to life on our stage. Because there is this compatibility that needs to happen from what the director's vision is to the stage, what I have to do is coordinate and correlate all of those things to ensure that we're getting a proper workflow on the day.
They needed help visualizing what this one particular level was going to look like. So they had this ice cave that we needed to light, and they needed help visualizing it because they had all these other things they were doing. Torchlight does a lot of advanced visualization anyways, so they hit me up. We figured it out before set, and then when I got to set, it was all about taking that scene that's like on the LED wall, and then working with the DP and making sure that that set and that wall were married and blended well together.
I had a really amazing experience with the Sony ecosystem, because it's a sound stage, it's some beautiful panels, and then that's only half of the battle, right? The other half is who's running the stage and who's helping you prep to get to the stage. The quality of B-Series and now the Verona, which is also even better, is phenomenal. It's the only time I've ever come into an LED world where I've done color accurate work at home with the VAD team for a month, and then you bring it in and it actually looks better on the wall.
Sony's approach has been very different. They've taken that technology from color reference monitors and essentially panelized it so that we can utilize it for virtual production. Now, that's very important because the reality of it is that the amount of resolution that we can push through these panels is much higher than others that are trying to do the same thing in the space. Because of the Virtual Venice, we've been able to look at things in the very beginning before we get to post. Only makes the post job easier. So it's less of a reach to get to the look that you're expecting to get, as that lets you carry all the way through to the pipeline. The thing that's important in this regard is that we were working in a very low light situation, and having the director have the LUT available to them on a color reference Sony monitor on set gave her the ability to tweak a lot of the creative on the day.
We have beautiful, beautiful moire tools now, where it'll tell you where you're starting to be in slight danger of moire, and then it'll tell you, oh, you're in the red zone now. You're totally gonna moire, right? Those toolkits for the Virtual Venice help me in pre-production, right? Because I can get in there, I can put in the sensor size, I can change lenses, I can see the outline of my virtual wall modeled, right? And I can see where I'm sitting, how things are showing up. You don't want to have the gear dictating your creativity, right? We use the Sony color calibrator. Normally, you have to have the LED wall has its own color space, and it looks different to the sensor. So you have to calibrate the wall. The work on that program, being able to like plug in and play and get a color accurate LUT onto the wall and have it suddenly look perfect, and just know that it's scientifically accurate, does it in 20 minutes.
It is part of that idea of swapping things where we're things that we typically think of in post, we think of it in pre-production. Essentially, our director was coming up with creative ideas on the day based on the fact that the color was very much closer to what you would expect on final pixel. So with that, she was able to make creative decisions you probably would not have been able to make on the day if you did not have a lookup table that will correct some of the off-balance colors that we were seeing.
Sony is the only player in the game that makes the cameras, that makes the walls, and that makes the monitors, and they all talk to each other. So I know I've seen virtual production tool sets that Sony's made where now calibrating your Venice to the wall, I mean, it's like the longest part is walking back to the computer, you know, it takes no time.
That compatibility across the whole pipeline is there. That's going to be a helpful tool for those who are coming into the virtual production space. So I'm very excited for what the next generation of Sony product is going to be.
One of the unique things about this Europa project is that we have a unique blend of industry professionals who have been in industry for decades, as well as students who are either still in school or just graduated. So it gives these students an opportunity to learn alongside these seasoned veterans of industry. That being said, from a Sony perspective, it's an interesting culmination of several Sony groups. So Torchlight for Previs and Techvis, Pixelmundo for the virtual production stage itself, Sony Electronics with the Virtual Venice and the Actual Venice 2 cameras, as well as all the support that goes along with that workflow, plus Sony Pictures Entertainment from a standpoint of being able to support the overall production. So all these technologies, or all these groups have come together to support this production, and I really think it speaks volumes to Sony being an entertainment technology company, because this project clearly is at the crossroads of technology and entertainment.
My name's Daniel De La Rosa. I'm with Sony Pictures, and today we're going to be talking about Europa. And I'll bring out our guest. If Jacqueline, Elyse, Rosenthal, the director, can come out. And I know he's around here somewhere because he was just working the stage. Eric Wolfie Wolford. Well, he'll join us in a second. Oh, here he is. Come on out, Wolfie. And so Wolfie. Anran Lee, production designer. Devin Mathis, Torchlight Advanced Visualization. And my good friend, Eric Weaver, executive producer and director of adaptive production with ETC. Over here, Eric. So by now, you've seen the BTS and the trailer, and I'd like to open up the discussion first for Jacqueline. If you could just tell us a little bit about your vision as a director for this project and what inspired you.
Sure. So I was really excited by this opportunity. Obviously, this is a crazy time to be trying new things. And Wolfie and I, my DP Wolfie, we were really committed to bringing you to a world that felt extremely real. We wanted the audience to feel so involved in these worlds, which is really hard when you're creating something that no one's ever been to before. So I think we actually built 6 environments in about 2.5 months. Very detailed, about 1,000 hours of previs and techvis with Torchlight. It was very involved to go to that level of detail. We programmed 10 different lighting cue animations because when you're using this technology, it's not just, okay, can we make this really beautiful? You want the audience to feel so immersed in the worlds that they kind of forget that they're watching something that isn't real. So we programmed a lot of oneers and a lot of kind of animation cues to make you feel like, okay, you're really immersed in the story. You forget exactly what you're looking at in the sense that, like, yeah, we really, when we land on the surface of Europa, which I think you can see right now, actually, when we land on the surface, we really took you through this like long extension shot. And when we worked on the blend, we wanted to make sure that we got really layered depths of the rocks, of the textures. And so it was really nice to be able to work with Cube Cinema. We worked with Rotu and CG Pro, our 3 VAD teams, to kind of put it together.
Great. And Eric, I wanted to throw over to you really quick. This is the 3rd virtual production for ETC, 7th test shoot overall. What were some of the concepts that you wanted to test in particular for this production?
So on this production, we really wanted to push the boundaries. We wanted to see what's coming next. One thing I recently published an article, and we're talking about how we're switching from OSVP 1.0 to 2.0. And in 2.0, bigger isn't necessarily better. Better is better. And I think the Sony stage is a really great example of that. You get darker blacks, you got better off-angle access, other things like that. So there's a whole myriad of aspects that we're trying to get to test, to play with, that this film really helped push the boundaries on.
Great. And next I wanted to touch a little bit on the Torchlight advanced visualization process for you, Devin. And he's handing you, Mike. But can you just walk us through first, at a high level, what's Torchlight and yours approach to doing advanced visualization?
So Torchlight has 2 big kind of spheres of influence, like I like to call it. So a lot of what we do is, one side is we help the filmmaker very early on understand what their film could look like. You know, a lot of these final looks come kind of later down the pipeline. So we take a lot of stuff that happens in the middle or the end and we bring them to the front, where filmmakers can now, at the start, really understand what it is they're working with, what it is it could look like, and how does that affect, like, you know, if a production designer makes a change, how does that affect visual effects? And if visual effects makes a change, like, how's that going to affect the DP? And the other side of what we do is how do we plan for this? Like, how do we actually shoot this thing? So once we understand what it looks like, we can put down a plan together to grab, you know, a scan of like where we are right now to understand if we have this and if we have these cameras and these lights, how could we position and plan out a whole shoot before any of us even get here? Because sometimes you'll have a team maybe in Australia and then France and Montreal, then LA. How do you get all of these people across all these countries and then you're shooting even somewhere else? How can we plan for your movie before you actually send people to shoot that? So for Europa, we had a lot of interesting tech viz where we were in this cave, right? And so in this cave, there was a lot of understanding of what can we get away with inside of the volume for where does the camera need to be so that are we gonna shoot off the wall? Where are we gonna need green support or blue support? What kind of, you know, for Wolfie's side of things, what kind of focal length would you wanna like take a look at and see? Because, you know, you can't have access to set all the time. So through those means, we can really solve a lot of questions for Wolfie, for OnRun, for all the production design, well ahead of time. And that's how we helped out for Europa.
Great, and just one quick follow-up on that. For virtual production in particular, because you can do both live action and or on-set physical production and virtual production. But for virtual production, how much of the backgrounds, the assets, configuration, camera positions, can you basically port over to whatever stage you're working with for them just to basically use exactly what you worked on and started it?
Yeah. So a lot of what we can offer is once we have these kind of plans and diagrams kind of set out, they become a really useful guideline for the day. Whether it's a live action shoot, and we're going to need a scan of like an exterior location, and we can figure out with production designer blueprints of like where the set's going to be in this, I don't know, in a desert with all these homes and stuff. Work with the director on what those cameras are going to look like, work with someone like Wolfie to figure out how it's going to be lit, or maybe it's a completely animated film, or it's an anime, or it's a virtual production shoot entirely. So we can plan out for all heads of departments well ahead of time for multiple different mediums on planning for this film before we actually get there.
Great. And Jacqueline, in terms of your experience with Torchlight, can you kind of tell us a little bit and explain the process of how you were able to basically achieve that geyser to cave shot?
There's no way we could have made this film without Torchlight, I will say that. Somewhere my VFX supervisor is floating around and he's nodding his head. But truthfully, yeah, a lot of our film, we have IC VFX, but then we have some VFX shots that are so advanced, and we had many conversations. We went back and forth, okay, and it involved Torchlight. We went back and forth. How do we articulate this vision where we make an audience feel like they're, I'm ruining the film for you right now, I'm very sorry, but where you feel like up and close and personal to this geyser in this foreign planet and this foreign moon, and it's just, overtaking you in the screen. And so we realized, okay, we kind of want to, first of all, what's our focal length? A lot of the time we realize, okay, we want to use an 100. We love the 100. That means we would have had to be in an entire different studio, placing our camera, shooting through a wall. So every shot that I said, oh, Wolfie, let's shoot this one, we were, shooting through a wall. So we couldn't do that. And he saved us so much time, so many resources. If you are a filmmaker and you want to get hired again, you really, sorry, not to be a Debbie Downer, but you really need to go in there and say, how am I going to be professional, take the best use of resources and time, not go over budget? We basically filmed this film 7 times with our, we could have done it with blindfolded with our eyes closed because we did so much previs. That's what the future of this is, if you really want to make a great film, not just a good film is good too, but if you want to make a great film that has a very articulated, clear voice, you need to really do that in pre. Everyone says fix it in pre. I think that's true. You have to fix it in pre. That's why they say it, because we went in there, Wolfie, Onren, and I have to thank Wolfie, because he had so many. Make sure you have that time to test your things too. Test it with Torchlight or a program that you can use that you have at your fingertips, but test it. But you also need to test it a little bit in person, whether in any capacity you can do that. We were able to test a couple things and catch it early on enough and pivot, because when we had people visit the stage, they were like, we don't know where the blend is. They looked. So this is a partially USC project, and I quizzed our dean, and I said, hey, Dean, where's the blend? And she couldn't find it, and that was that best moment of my time at USC. But yeah, that's the thing, is you really test it so that when you go there, as a filmmaker, your entire job is to make a good film that's going to move people. And the second you lose your audience, it's a no-win situation, especially with virtual production. If you're gonna have a shot and they're gonna see something that's a little bit off, it's over. So, yeah, hire these people as well, because they did my job for me. Yeah.
Thanks, and to that end,
That's true, right?
So, Wolfie,
Yes.
I've got a question for you in terms of what Jacqueline just said. What was your experience with the Techvis or the advanced visualization in helping you determine where do I put the camera, how do I orchestrate the camera move and lighting?
It really made a lot of difference for our lens selection. We also knew we had a limited budget for the set decoration, and we needed to have, we were using a techno crane. I decided early on we really needed a techno crane. We had a very delicate snow. We couldn't be putting track down and doing all these moves. and the techno crane would just let us move quickly through all of the shots. Even if we just needed a lock off high, you just extend it out. So we needed to make sure the crane would fit in. We needed to make sure I still had enough room for the lighting. We had modeled it all in Unreal, and we basically modeled all the shots beforehand, and we gray boxed them, and then we lit them, and then continued watching it, and then we'd get onto set, and we're like, what shot are we doing? We're like, well, play the video, it's this shot here. We've already shot it 7 times by the time we set foot on the stage, and the angles are huge. The other thing was we had a very limited time to build the virtual sets. You think of the digital sets as not being as complex as the physical ones, but it's equally as hard if I can build a 20-foot wide digital set instead of a 360 digital set. That's a huge amount of work for our team. So if you could just trim the fat on the left and the right and get people to focus into just what was going to be on camera and just spend all your time making that look great, that helped immensely to get the wall looking great.
Great. Now I want to move over to another topic, which is the CLED and set design. And I'll start with you, Jacqueline. Tell us about the virtual backgrounds. You hit it a little bit on it previously, but how close were they to what you were thinking in your head of what your vision was?
Yeah, it's crazy. I don't think I can ever my next film is completely opposite of this, which is very sad. Oh, sorry. I hope they don't watch this. Because I love virtual production now. It's what a dream as a creator to dream, see something so clearly in your head. I have to say, I'm so grateful that this was a little bit of a use case too, because our VAD teams were so generous and kind with us. I invited them on all of the calls. They were so generous and kind with us because I think much more like Pixo, CG Pro, Cube Cinema in India, these people, we had 17-hour Zoom days sometimes because our VAD teams were all over the world. But it was so amazing because they were so involved and they let us really get exactly pixel pitch, but exactly what we had in our head. They translated even better than sometimes I would have imagined it. That's the cool thing when you're working in this medium. You are able to allow a seat at the table to all of your collaborators much early on. So it's not, when you're on set, sometimes it's very stressful when it's not a virtual production. You're making decisions on borrowed time, on borrowed money, and it's not good. But we were able to make all these creative decisions before we got there, and it just felt like a cohesive team. Of course, there's going to be things that go wrong, little things that that always happens. But from a creative standpoint, we were able to already troubleshoot so much. It was really insane because it wasn't just my idea. It became part of what Wolfie feels and part of what Onren feels. And it just felt like more of such a collaborative medium. If there's anything that can happen in virtual production, I really hope that continues in a way where it becomes, it just gives you the flexibility to really come together as a team so early on. It's less so about fix it in post. It's fix your vision in pre. Yeah.
I think that was one of the things when I think about what do the different people do on the set and on the pre-production. Torchlight and CG Pro, it's how did they fit into the mix, right? We had different teams, Cubic, Cube, right, Roku, all these people were making individual scenes. We farmed out, the landing site went here, the cave went here, the drill site went there. We had 3 different teams coming at it with 3 different techniques for building, and we watched them all come up concurrently. But then it was okay, we've got 3 different sets built completely differently. Now we need to do one pass where Torchlight and CG Pro both sat down together and we're okay, let's take it all, let's homogenize it, so now when it hits the wall, all the levers are the same levers. And that's an invisible portion of set creation I think people don't understand. Why do you need that? You're oh, it's to harmonize it all together. It's refining layers.
And I guess that next layer step up is Final Pixel. Final Pixel and optimization is critical, and that's not something everyone can do. So I do also want to give a shout out to Mod Labs.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah.
For help there.
Mod Labs, you do a a scan, and instead of having to do a bunch of work on it, they've automated it. You put it in, and what would have taken our artists 2 more days, where we really didn't have 2 days. We wanted to add in 1 new piece, and to optimize it, we just didn't have the time. And they're like, we know how to do that. And we're like, I'll be damned, that worked. Oh, yeah, 6 months ago, we couldn't have done that.
Great. And Anran, question for you. Going from digital to physical, how did the backgrounds affect your approach and process for creating the physical elements that were used on stage?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like link everybody was saying that it's very important for a filmmaker to pre-visualize their script and story. And when I got onto the team, Jacqueline knows exactly what she wants to see. And then Wolfie kind of has a lot of experiences kind of with the virtual team. So I kind of just trying to help as a bridge to connect the VAD virtual side and also towards the physical side. Because I remember early on when Torchlight joined, there was like a meeting with us, and then I was like, okay, we introduced to them what our virtual set is gonna look like, and then at the end, someone from Devon's team were saying, okay, we know the virtual environment now, so where's the physical? Do we have rocks? Do we have anything to blend? What's our floor looks like in front of the LED screen? Because everybody kind of using this technology now is kind of like a bummer if you only see cars or a table, you cannot see floor. So that's limiting the cinematographer side that they cannot frame wide to see your frame, and it doesn't look well. And then you're saying, oh, now I can only shoot close up and medium close up. That sucks as a filmmaker because that's not how storytelling works. So that's where like we kind of brought a lot of physical elements with rocks, and then we kind of pre-scenicked everything. The larger the pieces is gonna be, the better helping the blend. And you always need to work with your virtual art department to see, okay, this is my material physical test. Here is your scan, and then we scan all of our rocks ahead of time. They optimize, they throw into the digital, so it gives help of the blending really well.
Great. And then
I have to give her a shout out. There was no budget for the art department. And I'm like, I've seen this before in music videos, and I'm like, and when I walked in and saw her work, I practically cried. I hugged you. It was like, oh my God, you've done a miracle here. I cannot believe how you've pulled this off. And it was the whole 60 feet of the floor.
Yes,
like,
yes. That's when your DP and director want to shoot anamorphic.
Yeah. Can we see twice the set?
Yeah, and we'll talk about that in a little bit.
There's a great daily where Eric takes the techno crane and just runs it around the set for 4 full minutes. And it's amazing at how much range he has, because we've shot on a lot of walls before, and we haven't quite had this ability up to this point.
Yeah, so to that end, since you brought it up, Eric, can you tell us a little about blending? It's come up a couple times, but can you explain to the audience exactly what blending is and why it's important to virtual production?
So a lot of, in some of these shots here, or typical virtual production, you're getting a lot of, like they said, cowboy shots, or you're getting these funny little things that are completely blocking out the wall to the floor. And you're not going to do LED panels on the floor typically, because you're going to get a lot of light spill and other things. So you have to be able to naturally blend these two into one another so the colors match. And that's really actually quite a tricky thing to do. And these panels were very good at helping us to kind of bring those edges together so that when we're coming up from a down angle or a side angle, that it really looked genuinely there, and like it was part of the whole environment.
Yeah, because I worked on a lot of LED volume stages too. The thing is, every stage works differently. Sometimes the LED has on wheels, and then there's like a 6-inch or 8-inch gap, and then we as art department has to provide that elevation part to kind of block it off. But when we were shooting on Sony, I was so happy there was already a deck. I was like, great, my scenic is going on top of that. So that was already helping a lot.
The LED wall at Sony Stage 7 goes down into a rear gutter, and then the platform covers over. And it really helps the blend because you can come high up onto it, and it also protects the wall so that when, powder and that doesn't have a chance to get onto it.
I'll make sure to put that shot back in the edit. I'm sorry.
And then really quick, on the notion of color, because the blend, that important aspect of blending, how are you able to get the color of your physical elements to match so well to the wall?
Yeah, so color is very tricky with the volume stage shoots, especially with DP, digital, and also physical. I think it's very important for a filmmaker to test their shoot on the actual stage they're gonna shoot. Like for say that when we did the DMPC test, which is great for the sizes of my physical portion, but when we go to stage 7, I think Wolfie and I got so excited. I was like, great, this is the wall we're matching. So he did his lighting test. Like the better he can match the actual shooting lighting, the better it's helping the art team. So when he got all his lighting set up, I had my color braided checker. So I put it over there so I know what's the lighting with the panel and his physical lighting affecting my scenery. So when art department building our set, we either building in a warehouse or somewhere under the sun. It's never the same lights. So I kind of have to work with that matching, to do color test, to do material test, and then bring it back to Wolfie, say, hey, is this working for you, for my cinematographer, or no? And then I will go lighter than darker. So it's easier to change that. So when I brought all my scenery in, I was like, maybe it's a little too light or bright, but then that team can also match that on their digital side in Unreal Engine. So that's how kind of I work with this set.
It's funny you talk about what your test lighting is versus what's on set. One of the things I've done from high-end beauty commercials for years is I have my gaffer light the makeup room first. And I make sure that the light matches my film set light. So if I've got a more yellow backlight and then a daylight, I have my gaffer just set up the two lights, and then that way the makeup artist does her work, and it looks exactly the same when we show up on camera. So
yeah, because I think a lot of people maybe start forgetting, yes, that's the panel. It does give you the lighting. Like the gaffer team still has to kind of work around with our environment to make everything work. So it's very nice to just work with every team, department ahead of time to talk through.
One of the other things that was great is we used a lot of the aperture lineup, right?
Took my next question.
Oh, yeah, fair enough.
No, go for it.
Yeah. So they have IBS, right, which is we put up these infinity bars. We had the aperture 600 Cs, right? And we had a lot of lighting cues in this cave scene. And it goes from dark to this to that, and it was a bunch of cues. So we would have the LED wall trigger the cues using image-based lighting. And now that's not DMX. We didn't have to spend hours programming each color. We simply took a video feed, plugged it into the application, and then it went in through the aperture lights. And as the color on the wall would change, the aperture lights would match it and change with it. And we had so many different lighting cues. You would be like, oh, we're at 30 seconds in, we're 45 seconds in. And my gaffer's like, I have no idea where we are. It's like, it's IBS, bro. Just hit play. And as long as the wall's on, the lighting was working perfectly. Lots of reflective water light kicking up and all of that. And that's some of the new tools that are coming down the pipeline that really make a big difference in working in LED wall spaces.
And that was really important because we can't have water, a big pool of water like in the cave scene on the stage. So it really achieved and sold that as if it was being reflected from the water when there was no water on stage.
Yeah, Wolfie set up, because we were trying to decide how to make this look as real as possible, and we just had a test screening, and me and the editor just kept waiting for someone to say oh, does that, what's going on there? What's happening? And they believed it so much, like the cave scene, they weren't taken out of it at all. And I think it's because they set up a pool. So this is the two of them. They set up a pool of water. They had mirrors in it, and they had these caustics reflecting on her face in the same color as the background.
Yeah.
And it was just incredible.
Yeah,
I had worked on a Tom Ford movie, and we had to do reshoots for a pool, and the pool lights reflecting up. So we used real water in a kiddie pool and shine a heavy light onto it and skip it up.
Yeah, because you already have the wall is doing its job. So it's just a little tiny practical will give you a very $1 million kind of effect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's something we learned in this project is it's the devil's in the details. Like every little thing. Even we had this one scene that was kind of a throwaway scene a little bit, but it's this tiny passageway, very dark. Yeah, very dark passageway, and you know, we were like, this doesn't look completely real. So we just brought in one of the larger rocks that Anren had, and we had the actors kind of go past it with their helmets that you saw earlier in the demo. She has that helmet. And because the light matched with the helmet, we just believed it was a real place that she was going by. So like little tiny things really pay off.
And speaking of aperture lights, the slide behind us is a shot of one of the aperture lights, not the cave scene, but just to give you an idea of what these lights look like and the different shapes. Before we move on, I just want to ask Devin, in terms of there's been a lot of talk about the coordination amongst the teams, and how did that work with Torchlight working with Anran for physical set, but also the illustrious Christina Lee Storm, I got to give her a shout out, on the VAD team. Walk us through a little bit about that process and kind of how you got brought different teams in, as well as Wolfie and the DP.
So a big important role on set, especially in a virtual production context, is having someone that understands how all of this physical stuff kind of works, and having someone the same person understanding how back in Unreal Engine, how does all of this work, and how does Wolfie's work affect Anren for the set, and then how does that affect the VAD team back on the computers who need to either help blend that stuff back in or help support something or enhance something, you know? I think a lot of that comes down to just the experience of understanding those roles, those necessities, and what's going to make the shot, what's going to make it punch and make us, you know, feel and believe that we're actually in a place, that like it's not there's no separation from the foreground to the background or the midground, that this is one cohesive, tied together kind of universe.
Cool. Moving on to Wolfie, your approach. What was your experience with the Cooke anamorphic lenses? I know we talked a little bit about previously, but I mean, anamorphic, virtual production, not the first two kind of things that necessarily go together immediately, but what was your experience like using something that was such a wide field of view?
Yeah, the traditional wisdom is that anamorphic lenses go together not at all with virtual production, right? And we're like, well, we're pushing envelopes. Let's just push all of the envelopes. And when we went down and tested the Cooke anamorphics, they're just so stunningly cinematic. You know, when you pick the right sensor and you pick the right lens, you've done 80% of the heavy lifting. And if you pick the wrong ones, you're fighting it the whole rest of the shoot, right? We were able to put it into Techvis. We were able to like look at it, and that Sony stage is so enveloping, and we knew that we could get our shots, you know? And when you're shooting anamorphic, it films wider. You know, the environment becomes part of the character. It's one of the characters. When you shoot anamorphic, you think of anamorphic lenses with the old spaghetti westerns, and you get those big vistas, right? So Europa is literally one of the characters of the movie. So we knew we wanted to have a lot of empty space and carry her, right? And carry that spirit of that land. Anamorphics were absolutely the best way to capture that. The Cooke line also is incredible because the skin tones and the quality let you mix in spherical when you need it. Anamorphics will not focus closer than 3 feet on most of them, right? So then there are certain times where you need a claustrophobic close-up, right? So we would switch to the ones, you know, 68 millimeter spherical and get our really overly intimate shots. And then the rest of the time we were in anamorphic. And you couldn't tell the difference. When we were in the test, I was like, these Cooke lenses are so flawlessly matched between series. I'm like, this is incredible. And I asked the lens tech, I'm like, am I crazy for just like, he's like, oh no, yeah, Interstellar, they shot spherical and anamorphic, mix it all the time, you know, looks great. I was like, we're doing that.
And in terms of, I remember the day of one of the anamorphic shoots, going in, and I didn't know where the fresh room was, and someone had to point it out to me. It was like the largest fresh room I've ever seen. and what were some of the challenges with you know,
shooting on that?
That, you know, that wide background?
So a frustum, the camera and Unreal know what lens you're using, and it knows what you see on the wall. So it generates a slow image for all of the wall, and then it puts a square up on the screen. It's a little bigger than what your lens can see, and when you move the camera around, it just does the live video inside that inner frustum, right? And usually they're about that big, and they're covering like, small chunks of the wall and moving it around. But when you came in, it's like, where's the frustum? It's like, edge is there and over there. And it's like, oh, because the anamorphics just, don't stand behind us. We see you,
Exactly. And Anran, in terms of preparing for those shots, the anamorphic shots, were there any challenges that you encountered with, like, I need to fill up this entire space because it's all going to be in camera?
Yes, especially when that Sony stage was huge. It was like 50 feet by like 40 feet, kind of like, it's huge. It's like maybe 3 or 4 times of this area. But the thing is, I will hesitate when my DP and director request a super wide shot with anamorphic. But then the second thing will be, is it worth my work, or does it like worth for the stories? And I asked this specifically, was like, is that really has to be that wide? Because we almost see the bottom of the stage. I was like, can you kind of like do a little like closer? And they were like, no. And I was like, let me see the shot. So I see that on the camera, I see that on the screen. And I was like, okay, so this is our landing, right? They just got down to Europa. I was like, okay, I will put my work towards it. And then I think it's worth it because Jacqueline and I had a talk with another director before we start shooting, which does a lot of music videos and on LED shoot as well. But then she said, oh, that's a lot of ask for your production designer. But the thing is, you're using that wall. That wall is not just this small, it's this big. So you kind of have to work around, like the wall does the job for you, and now as a designer, you kind of have to work towards it to make the environment looks nice. So I'm actually happy with all my limited budget that actually turned out pretty well. Because I think I saw everybody smile when they see like a huge landing site. It's like, it helps the character. It helps everybody as a filmmaker to tell the story. So I think I would do it if they convince me.
I think it's really important to recognize the role of film in human advancement. Long before we put a shuttle up into outer space, we were watching imagery showing us the moon and imagining us going there. And when I was a little kid, I would watch, Cosmos, listening to him talk about a pale blue dot when he turned, the Voyager back and pointed it at Earth. And we got the view of the Earth from as far away into our own universe as you could imagine. That inspired me to be into the space program. It's the pinnacle of what our civilization climbs for. So when I'm working as a cinematographer on a project like this, I want 10-year-olds in the audience to imagine Europa, and they're gonna go there. And they're gonna go there because they believe that shot. They're gonna go there because they're inspired to set foot like we show their imagination and set it on fire. And that's why I was like, yeah, let's build it wide. Show the wall. Show it wide. When you see it and you're standing there, you see the actors looking around, and they're there on another planet in our solar system. It's in our grasp. In 100 years, one of us is gonna be there if we keep it up and if we keep inspiring our kids. And I think that's like one of the joys of working on a project like this I really feel and believe in.
And that's the good thing about making a film too, because I think Wolfie and I did bring different aspects to it, because I'm so lucky I had him reminding me that this is a beautiful thing, because there was also this thing that we always wanted to go back to, because there's a little bit of the film where you're not sure how to feel about the characters being there. But if I didn't have Wolfie, I don't think I would have leaned into like the beauty of the place. But there are certain shots where you see this flag planted in the core of this moon, and it's very primitive, and it gives you this very kind of colonial feel. And when you see her and you see this gorgeous place, and it's just nothing but this tiny human and an environment as far as the eye can see, and this flag by a corporate company, it just there's something about it, and if it hadn't been that wide, you just wouldn't sit there and feel. And also, I just want to give a shout out to our producers on the project too, Shannon and Ting Ting, because they got us that, and Eric got us that Technocrane, and Tom got us that Technocrane because that shot where you slowly pull out and you see this human, it makes you just pause and say, why is this human in this frame at all? So it plays devil's advocate in an interesting way, and we brought such different energies to some of those shots.
Yeah.
And so it really plays out like you have that internal conflict of what to feel for the character. So it's
The imagery should inspire us to go, and the script is a warning against how we go there, right? Do we go there to plant a flag, or do we treat it like Antarctica and we come together and we share our knowledge and start moving on to the next place our civilizations can reach, right? To get to a bigger solar system wide galaxy, kind of crowd, we need to really think about, do we want to do that in the same old way, or do we do it in new ways?
Yeah. So, cause also when you're designing your lenses, you don't just design one type of lens. It's you go from small, micro, and to the widest one. So also with the wall as well, there are different purposes of different sizes and stages. It really depends on what story or what you're trying to shoot. There are stages like this would be awesome for some commercials, music videos, it's the color of the panel. But then when you're shooting sci-fi, science fiction with airplane crashing or spaceship or cockpit, you need a little wide, and then you need space to work around. It's just exact same as your size of the lens and all the equipment.
If you want to make an epic film, there is nowhere to shoot it, but the best place to shoot it is Stage 7 at Sony. I honestly. What Enren is saying, there was something about it. It just lends itself to epic feeling. I don't know. It was just it's the perfect stage for virtual production. We all felt like it just, and also the Pixar team were just amazing partners to us through and through. So they were wonderful. So I just want to tell you guys to check out that stage if you're ever considering making anything.
I walked in and I look up and I'm like, your ceiling panel. They're like, yeah, it's 1.9.
Nice.
And I'm like, your ceiling panel is better than most people's wall. This is ridiculous.
Eric, I wanted to toss it over to you and we've been talking about this throughout the panel discussion, just the collaboration aspect. Could you just kind of tell us what your feelings were about collaboration between ETC, Sony, and all of the other groups that were involved with this? You were kind of like the maestro bringing all these teams together for this project.
Yeah, a little while back, Haji had kind of reached out to me and said, hey, Eric, I think it'd be great to bring the teams together. And you're absolutely right. There's a lot of groups that were involved in this. We had to pull them all together. And I had actually told, I don't know if anybody knows Bill Bagalar, but I had told him probably 6 or 7 months before that, wow, you really got a lot of really great resources coming together. When you look at Sony, and Sony has a gaming division, Sony has pictures, Sony has electronics, now Sony has Pixo and Torchlight. These are the fundamental recipe pieces to execute this formula. And so, I don't know if you've owned any lighting companies, but invest in IBL. But other than that, you had so many great components. And then just bringing some of the mentors and other people together to try and just pull the recipe off was kind of key. And that's what I think really went well here with this group. Oh, look, you can see a little picture there.
Isn't that cute?
And
I have to say, ETC is incredible in the scene because they really grab it by the shirt collar and drag the scene forward, right? It's so rare to get a shoot where you're like, look, we've got all of the partners. Everybody's working on, the Cook lenses have some new special sauce under the hood that I can't talk about yet. But they're amazing, and they've got some really amazing stuff coming. And the camera's really pushing it forward. The wall is being pushed forward. The aperture lighting is really engaged. And it's as a cinematographer, I'm watching the scene really start to gel. Everybody's working together, but it's people like ETC and companies like that And Weaver, you're the mayor of LED Town. You know everybody, and you get things happening that need to happen. You're one of those hidden people behind the scenes that are really making things advance for us. And I'm so grateful to be able to be there and see us and like, here, let's all make this, turn it into like where it's going to go.
Thank you so much. One other thing there is the metadata. People aren't really noticing that in all this, but the metadata through the entire pipeline is absolutely critical as you move into the future. And that's some of the other things that we were really pushing on this one, being able to extract it from all the different sources and give it only to who needed what, when, later, you know. And then also taking some of that metadata and creating the knowledge graph for the Movie Lab's 2030 vision. So there's a bunch of work being shown off here, how we created some of that stuff off the data as well. So there's a bunch of other things also besides on the screen that you're missing here that we really worked very hard on, and that is here to just kind of bless the community.
Jacqueline, what was your experience working with all these teams?
It was honestly like probably one of my favorite experiences, just to watch how people came together. And you know what Eric's saying, there just were so many different pieces of the puzzle that came together. You know, we have a few teams that got us back like colored dailies with like that.
And they were actually processed in Australia.
Yes.
Crazy. Syntegral, yeah, Dane's team.
Yeah, Syntegral. There are just so many partners on a project like this. I think if you're a filmmaker out there and you really are ambitious and you want to jump into this, this is the time to do it, because a lot of the people that I met on this project were very established. It was very established, 50%, and then 50% were up and comers. And like the craziest and coolest thing about jumping on a bandwagon of new technology in any aspect, I mean, I feel like I'm talking about this at NAB, so it's a little bit meta. But like with new technology, it's just you have an opportunity to put yourself in there and rise with new people who are learning the same kind of skills as you. I think that's what a lot of this project was people who are very passionate about it and said, I want to get involved in this. I want to get involved in this because I am passionate about it. And it made its way into the film. So I really encourage people to just go out there and find your people. And also, you know, the thing about new technology is you're going to learn lessons. You're going to learn what works. You're going to learn what doesn't work. And I think it's really important to give yourself the opportunity to take some risks, because if you don't take those risks, you're not really going to be moving things forward. And I think that's something that ETC was very generous with us about. You know, I am learning so much every day about certain things with this technology. We all are, and just being able to be in an environment where, I don't know, you got to be surrounded by people who wanted to take those risks. It's really important. You are the 5 people you're closest to. So be really intentional about the people you work with. And if you want to do a project like this, it's really just put your foot in that door and find your way there, and then it'll happen.
Yeah, so I do have to give a shout out to Rebel Fleet and Console. That was our main metadata hub, which was amazing. But that is kind of what you were saying there, is that even some of the best experts get a chance to learn on these kind of productions, where we're allowed to somewhat fail, although we never do, to push the boundaries to that point. And that's why some of these amazing people jump on and give their time. So,
Feel really great. A lot of times people also ask, like, okay, this is all great up here on the panel. How do I learn a little more about Unreal Engine, or how do I learn about LED walls? You know, there's a lot of YouTube videos, the ETC has a series of white papers. I would follow them for sure. Our partners who helped so much on this are CG Pro. Take a CG Pro class and learn an introduction to Unreal Engine. Take an ICVFX class with CG Pro. Get onto a sound stage, have it shown to you. If you're a cinematographer, sooner or later you're going to be needing to do LED wall work, and you cannot fake it till you make it with the LEDs. It's fake it and you break it. So, you know, before you have to get trained on the job, go get trained up and know what you're doing when you're working on these projects.
And to that end, I mean, I don't know how many of you saw the demo that Wolfie did before this, but there'll be a demo in this booth 3 times a day going over the virtual production process, so it's also another good opportunity to learn. In fact, physical elements here are also designed by Anren as well. So we're actually having the actual kind of products here that were used on the short Europa. So with that, thank you everybody, and thank you for attending.